So yeah, just to let you know a little bit of background about what I'm doing here is just it's just a casual conversation with basically members of the street epistemology community, people that have been sort of on the server. So different people from different backgrounds and perspectives, different times being members of the community, different amounts of experience and exposure to it. So yeah, definitely kind of just, I think partly it's to give a sense of the breadth of the community, so that, you know, people can see all the different sort of perspectives and ways in which people have arrived here. And partially it's also, I think, an opportunity to get people, so people can get to know you as an individual, and so that, you know, when we're all on Discord or whatever, like, you're just not another anonymous face that somebody might have a little bit of a handle on who you are and might know the sorts of things that you like to talk about. So I hope that's okay with you. Just half an hour or so, just a bit of a chat, really. So starting from there, what was your journey to the street epistemology community? When did you first discover street epistemology?
I first discovered it when I was watching, when I was a new deconvert from Christianity. I was watching The Atheist Experience, and I saw Tracy, I think it was Tracy, she showed a clip from Reed's channel from Cordial Curiosity. And it was the clip where he was talking to Tia, and then it was in contrast to a clip talking to someone else about the same subjects. And I was blown away at the conversation style, and I quickly subscribed to Reed's channel, and then I even asked him about what kind of cameras he used and stuff, and I got the same mic.
The Rode, that's the Procaster, right?
Yeah. So I was originally going to like go out in the wild and do it, but I never ended up actually doing it for whatever reason. I've had a million side projects going forever, game development and a bunch of other stuff that kind of never went anywhere. But the last like 6 months or so, I've been trying to put into practice more, get involved more in the conversations around religion, philosophy, science, and then I was looking for ideas for my channel. So I was like, hey, why don't I do some of this street epistemology stuff? And I've been watching it for years. I've been engaging in it privately for years. Whenever I'm talking to a crazy family member or something. So I thought, yeah, why not?
That's cool. So you mentioned that you were a believer at some point. Could you talk about that a little bit?
If
you're comfortable, obviously. Just there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I absolutely am. So I think I grew up like kind of Christian. Like I had a Christian upbringing, read the Bible and stuff. We attended church off and on, but I kind of fell away from all of that, in my teenage years. But then when I was 16, and I had a bunch of people invite me to a youth group. And I went along, and it was a Pentecostal youth group, and I had a really tremendous spiritual experience. Like I had people praying for me, and so I didn't want to be prayed for, and I was like crouching over, and they came and prayed for me anyway, and they were prophesying and telling me stuff that they couldn't have known, or I thought they couldn't have known at the time.
Oh.
And they were saying like, I know that you feel like X, Y, Z, but God wants you to know that, A, B, C, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, it hit. And I remember just looking down, and I just saw like a puddle of tears. And and then I felt like almost intoxicated for about 2 days. Like I felt drunk. And when I came back to school on Monday, there was such a shift in my personality. I went from being like this depressed kid at school to people calling me Captain Christian, because I ended up being this like real happy, positive person. I was running Bible studies at school. I was so into the religion, and the more and more I pushed into, the more and more I wanted to understand this thing, the more and more I got involved in the local church and the youth ministry, and I eventually became the youth pastor of that church. So I was overseeing sometimes we'd have 115 youth come on a Friday night, and we'd preach and do laying on of hands and speaking in tongues and all that stuff. And and that was a kind of my Christian journey. But I was a Christian for a while, but then I eventually lost that job as a youth pastor. I was unordained, so I didn't go through the youth ceremonies or anything to be ordained, but I was in the role of youth pastor. eventually I kind of went through a really hard time in life when I lost the job as a youth pastor. I started getting involved in I started getting really depressed. I was introduced to weed. I started smoking a little bit of weed, and then I eventually found myself in this situation where I was in a really dark and miserable place. And eventually I pulled myself out of it. I met the lovely wife that I have now. We were committed Christians. The first time we slept together was on our wedding night. Like, we were really committed. We moved in together the first time when we were married. But then through the process of this one, like, I'm sorry, this is a long ass story, but
how no, dude, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this I think it might have been, I can't remember what it was, but I had a few conversations with people about evolution, and I wanted to understand it better because I knew it was wrong, and I wanted to understand it better. So I remember like getting a bit conflicted internally about the scientific realm, and I was really interested in science and my beliefs. So I remember one day deciding that I was going to create this document called The Objective Truth of Origins, and I was going to try and look at every little realm of evidence, and I'm going to look at it honestly. And that's when I come to the realization that even though I was a Christian, I had to approach the information as if I wasn't, and it was okay to do that because I believe that it was okay to do that because it would lead me to God anyway, because God was 100% true. And it was okay to take off like my God glasses, look at the evidence, and then put them back on. And I remember actually doing that. I remember going, okay, I'm going to look at this video. I'm going to try and remove all my presuppositions. I remove them. I watched the video, or I read the paper, or something, and I was like, okay. And then I put my glasses on at the end, like put my Christianity back on. And I was like, okay, that was interesting. I noticed something I wouldn't normally have noticed. And I started noticing little cracks, and then those cracks became bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually I'm in like this giant canyon, and I'm going, how did I not notice this huge gaping hole? And that became really internally hard to deal with. So I started reaching out to a lot of Christians, my Christian friends, and I noticed that they not only didn't want to talk about it, but when they did talk about it, they were extremely dishonest. Like, they were like absolutely the opposite of like how I was trying to approach things. They would lie to themselves or to me. They would misrepresent data. And that started me on a long journey to evaluate my faith and science, and trying to marry my perspectives. And eventually I came to the conclusion that eventually I came to the conclusion that there was no way for me to justify my belief anymore. And although I had these internal feelings of love, and I still felt this warm feeling when I read the Bible, or even though I had these incredible spiritual experiences, I could no longer attach a truth claim to them and be logically consistent. And it wasn't something I could walk back on either. It was like, once I dipped my toes in there, it's not like I could change anything. I would just be lying to myself. I'd be going back in the closet, per se, and just pretending like I didn't see that stuff. So that's kind of what my journey was.
Fuck me. David, that was awesome. I have often said, I've been an atheist my whole life. Like, I just, I've never had to do that. I've never had to do that work. And I've often really wondered whether I would be able to, like really genuinely, like I can empathize with how hard that must be. And to do that, just sort of to roll it back to base principles as you did, and just say, look, I need to look at this, and still with that confidence of that it would lead to God, and to do that work is incredibly impressive. That is an amazing story.
It was like incredibly heartbreaking, but it was also extraordinarily exciting, because when I would be like figuring things out, it was like landing on an alien planet and like having to relearn everything. Like, wait, so I don't have to make up some justification about these dinosaur fossils. I can like buy one if I want, and it's probably as old as they say it is. And I'm like, whoa, like, or like when I've learned something new about evolution or something, I'll be blown away. And like the more I learn about science and stuff, it just was really exciting. Yeah,
I've heard
heartbreaking.
I've heard people say that it can feel like taking off a very big, heavy overcoat that you don't need. Suddenly feel much lighter and freer as a result. The analogy of taking off the glasses, the religious perspective, as it were, and putting it to one side is one that I think I recall from an article where a lady was talking about letting go of her religion, and she'd sort of been wrestling, I think, on and off with this idea of like she was suffering the cognitive dissonance, I think, of not really believing, but still feeling like she needed to believe. And she talked about going out to a park and sitting in the park and saying that she was just going to, just for a moment, she was going to sort of let go of her faith just for a second and see how it felt. And I think for many people that might seem silly, but I think I can really understand what she's talking about. And I've heard many religious people describe it almost in that way. To almost deliberately take off for a moment. And she said that, she felt that she could put it on again straight away, just peek beneath it to see what the world looked like. And when she took it off and she looked around and she realized that everything was exactly the same, and she wasn't really sure what she expected to see. She wasn't struck down by lightning. There wasn't suddenly cats and dogs fornicating in the streets. It just suddenly became just normal, and then she just basically realized that she didn't need to necessarily put it back on straight away, and she became an atheist. And it's remarkable. And I hear these stories. The more of these stories I hear, the more I realize, firstly, everybody's journey is just personal and unique, but there are definitely some characteristics that I think are similar. And one of the things I'm very keen to do on this channel is and in fact, actually, this has shifted the entire category of where I'm going to put this video, because one of the things I'm keen to do is try to talk to people about their deconversion stories, because I think the more stories that are heard and the more variety of those stories, the more the chances that somebody will find one of them that it will resonate with them, and they'll think, it's okay for me to let go of my faith. Maybe that would be useful for people. That's awesome. That's an incredible story. So I've got to be honest with you. I want to talk to you about your game making, but I'm going to really try to hold off on that. What was you spoke about coming sort of across Reed's videos and Reed's content and sort of engaging with that. And so after that, how have you found the street epistemology community? Like, what's your been experience of it so far? And how long ago is this? Like, I'm not sure what the timeline here is. So
I think I saw Reed's video like shortly after it came out. Might have been 2016. But with this one with Tia, 2016.
It's a great video. If anybody hasn't seen it, you have to see that one, because it's just delightful.
It's amazing. Yeah. Since like joining, like I've only just started learning how to use Discord and stuff. So, but my experience on the server has been really good. People have given me like a constructive feedback, and I've been able to share my videos there without I'm feeling like I'm spamming or anything. And people watch them, and I watch others. So it's been pretty good. It's been a pretty good community, and everything's pretty well thought out. Pretty well thought out. So you're now doing C conversations online, right? Is that right? Yeah, and I think it happened one day where I think I was editing some video, or I had some interview prior, maybe, or I can't remember why. There was some reason why I was drinking during the day. I don't normally make a habit of drinking during the day, but I had a couple of glasses of whiskey, and I thought, why don't I just jump on Omegle and just like, what's the worst that can happen? And of course, you get rejected by like 50 people before you find anyone. But I remember I had a conversation with like a white supremacist, and I was like, okay, that was dark. And then I had a conversation with someone who believed someone who believed that like it was a younger guy, and he believed in that that you should believe in yourself. And I was like, okay, like it was a good conversation, but it wasn't that wild of a take, and then I got onto some of the spiritual beliefs and religious beliefs, and I really found it interesting. And that's when I uploaded my first couple of videos. That was from that first session with Redacted and Josh. So yeah, and then just recently I've uploaded another one from someone who ended up being a little bit more popular than like on the internet than I thought he was. I didn't know who he was, and his someone described him as on Twitter as what you'd get if you ordered a flat earther from Wish. But that's not. And I only feel okay kind of poking fun a little bit at him because and I probably shouldn't. I actually feel a little bit bad, but he poked fun at the Jews for a long time in that conversation. So I didn't feel. Yeah, okay. So I'm not. You know, he set the bar at a certain level, so I feel like I'm comfortable to poke fun at him back. So, but not that I did in the conversation. But yeah, sure. Yeah, because obviously that would ruin it. But yeah, it was a hard and nasty conversation.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think there's a sort of. There's an odd selection criteria at play, right? In these spaces, like in some ways, Omegle is going to. For anybody that doesn't know, do you want to explain sort of how Omegle works, like mechanically?
It's like if you took the worst parts of the internet from the 90s, like the people who knew how to use the internet, and like teenagers, and you put them in one like one section of the internet. It's people. I'm finding that it's people who have got something to say. Like they're coming on to like, usually because they're either drunk and they just come back from a party and they wanted to talk about something, or they've got like they've got a strong belief that they want to like tell someone about. So it ends up being cool, but I think it's a more of an extreme version of what you'd get in like the public, unless you're from maybe somewhere.
The mechanism behind Omegle is that people are randomly connecting to you, right? Like there's no determinism. So you're just pressing next, and then you're connected randomly over video voice chat to some stranger. So it has some character of SE, you know, or at least, you know, that in some ways I think street epistemology suffers from a slight lensing problem, which is that the most visible version of it is actually conducted on the street with strangers. And so there's an assumption, I think, therefore, that that's what the street in street epistemology means, and also that's necessary for street epistemology, which I would contest, but I can certainly sympathize with the reason why people might feel that way about it. But there is something about the actual act of doing SE with a stranger that's really invigorating. It's much more exciting than doing it with somebody who's got a claim and they've seen that they want to practice, in other words, and to actually have a live conversation with a real stranger is exhilarating. But you're right, like I would imagine that people on Omegle are there for a reason, and like they're looking to scratch a particular itch, whether that's to push their white supremacy or to just be as offensive as they can be, or whatever it is. If you think that's hard, I've been experimenting with my friend Joe on doing street epistemology in VR chat, and I assure you that that's just like,
oh wow,
sticking your face into the internet and letting it vomit back into you. It's just unreal.
It's like if 4chan had
that's right. If 4chan had a fever dream, there would be something like VR chat. and the reality is that we've ended up having some really interesting conversations. It's just so hard. It's the signal to noise ratio is really broken, but I really, you know, obviously the pandemic has changed our opportunities necessarily to want to go out there and sort of address the great, literally unwashed public. So I'm really kind of intrigued by these kind of ideas of Omegle, and you know, it's something I actually thought about before I'd seen your content and thought maybe that's a place to swing in at. And I suspect that, as is the case probably with VR as well, like there's probably processes, mechanisms that we would need to consider, I think, that might be unique to these particular environments in order to have an effective conversation. I was on Reed's channel yesterday, actually, and Reed ended up talking to this 9-year-old in an interview, right? And that's a very unusual circumstance. That's not your typical situation, and it was kind of hilarious. And one of the things that was clear is, like, you know, we can't just use the standard approach when we're talking to somebody that young, right? Like his parents were agreed and everything. It was all presumably above the board, but clearly, like, the circumstances there dictated a slightly different approach, right? And so I'm wondering, like, what those different approaches might be for something like VR chat. And do you have any advice? Have you learned any useful lessons you could impart?
Well, I think that if you were to jump into something like Omegle or something like that, I don't know too much about VR, but yeah, what you're doing in the VR chat. But straight away, when people see your video quality, they think you're a bot, and they go like, "Hello." And they're going to be confused.
Gotcha.
Because usually people are just on their laptop,
right?
And they usually ask you like, "Are you a podcaster, or are you a?" And I also have text at the bottom of. It's also good to have text at the bottom, like, so I use a virtual camera that says like, "What do you believe?" And I think that if people don't just skip you automatically because they're nervous or they think you're a bot or something, then usually the first thing they do is they freak out, and you've got to like calm them down and be like, "Hey, just so you know, I'm doing this. I'm not going to upload it if you don't want to. If you want to partake, it'd be really interesting to talk about something you believe." And then I'm also mentioning that that for you it's also a little bit nerve-wracking. So right. I found that, like, just so you know, I'm also, this is makes me feel like I'm a little bit nervous as well, so don't feel bad, etc., etc. That usually helps. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, there's a tendency, I think, for people to feel like if you're the one that's looking to ask the questions, then somehow you're fully confident. Like, it seems like a very confident thing to do. But it's actually, it can be very nerve-wracking. It can be kind of, especially with a stranger, where I guess our general social norms are working against us, right? We would not want to, like, it's the classic thing, right? You never talk about politics, religion, or sex with a stranger, right? Yeah. You like company, you just try and avoid those things. But they're the best topics, and when you're talking to a stranger, so much more liberating, right?
I know. I can't help myself. I'm really bad at small talk, and we're going. This has got a bit of a funny story. I was going out for dinner I was taking my boss's, my wife's boss and his wife out for dinner. So all four of us were going out for dinner one time. And on the way there, it's my wife's boss. I want to be respectful. I made a joke. I said, "So I was thinking about bringing up religion, abortions, and politics or something." And then Amy laughed or whatever. But then sure enough, by the end of the night, we had talked about all three of those subjects.
Right.
It ended up being okay. Like, it ended up being fine. Like, I wasn't like saying, "What do you think?" But it just ended up, I think I told the joke and then we got onto it. But I hate small talk. I always end up in the corner of the party talking to someone about, like, how do we know what we know? Or, like the problem of evil or something. You know?
But this is the difference, I think, is that the reason why we don't want those topics to come up is not because we want to not have those conversations. It's because when people feel those topics are allowed, they don't want to talk to you about them. They want to tell you about them. So they want to tell you what they think about politics. They want to tell you what they think about religion. They want to tell you what they think about, morality or abortion or whatever it is, right? And that's not interesting to me. I don't want to sit there and let you just broadcast your opinion at me. I think the difference is in the nature of a conversation, right? I think we have to be talking about these things. And I think one of the things that SE is very good at is actually allowing it to be in a conversation between you and somebody that you're talking to. Even if the locus of the conversation is with them, you're still working with them to understand it and challenging them and prompting them. And I think that's really cool. But yeah, I think, I would love, any of those topics. If we're having a conversation, I'm in, right? But if we imagine another scenario where we're stuck next to somebody who won't stop talking about one of those things, that's a whole different story. That's the obnoxious guy, right?
Yeah, it's so frustrating. I noticed too that a lot of people, and this is something that could be probably, this idea kind of came forth when I heard, I think, do you know Destiny, Stephen Bonnell?
Yeah.
The Twitch stream. Yeah. He mentioned it, and he said that people's beliefs are like webs. Like, people are like, they get into a belief system, and then there's all these other belief systems attached to it, and they go, they try and give a response to what they think people in that web would give. So instead of actually having their own beliefs, people go, oh, I'm left wing, so therefore I like this. It's like an identity first, and then they build their beliefs from that. Or I'm right wing, so therefore da 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 da. And like you can see it quite clearly with a lot of things. Like you'll see the anti-maskers are the same people who are pro-life. And you're like, this seems to be a little bit counterintuitive, like, because a lot of them will agree on certain things, like, that, we should do everything to protect human life. And then they'll say, and masks do protect the life, but it's our rights. And then they'll won't wear a mask. Or it's the same. It's not just, I don't mean to pick on no. Those people, because there's the same thing with like the left as well. Like there's a wide spectrum of really silly ideas. And I think it comes down to on anything, religious, atheist or whatever. And it comes down to, I think, people being stuck in these like belief webs, like you can think of it like identity more than reason thought.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of people not confusing ideas with identities. Like the moment you confuse an idea with who you are as a person, you stop responding to criticism of the idea rationally and start defending it as if it's an attack on your person. And I think that that's that's good for the idea. That's good for the ideology, but I don't think it's healthy for humans. I also think it's a terrible shame when societies somehow, I don't know when it got decided, but the idea that inconsistency is heresy in modern society. The moment you've changed your mind on anything or been seen to be not sure or not following the line of thread, that you've drawn. So if you've identified yourself as X, you have to now act in line with X at all times for fear of being called a heretic. And this is very, very damaging. Again, all of these patterns are very good for the ideas and the ideologies, but they're not good for the humans. Humans are fallible and make mistakes. We should be allowed to say, you know what? Yeah, I get it. Like maybe I'm right wing, but maybe on this issue, I don't agree with the general policy. And that's actually what most human beings would want to say on a lot of things, right? Like Chris Rock had this thing about he talked about baffled by the fact that the political system is liberal and conservative, like Republican or Democrat, right? It's just all binary, and he just says it's just not like that. Some things I'm liberal on, some things I'm conservative on. Human beings are a complex, nuanced package, but we have to vote one way, right? And it's not so easy necessarily just to say you're one way or this other way. So nuance is lost, and again, all of this disadvantages political campaigns as well, right? It's useful for you to be seen as you're just X. We've got you now. You're not allowed to change your mind. You've got to toe the party line, and even if that's not externalized so overtly, it's implied by social norms and social behavior characteristics that we see. So yeah, all this is deeply concerning, and I think this is one of the reasons why I love SE, because I think it's something at least that's actually acting against those intuitions, challenging everything, right? Regardless of whether I agree with the view or not, challenge it. Like every idea should be challenged. Everybody should have good reasons for believing what they believe, or at the very least, take the time to reflect on whether those reasons are sound or not. I think it's super important. David, I've been ranting away for a little while, but one question I neglected to ask, which was, and feel free if it's not if you're not comfortable saying, but did your wife also, is she still a Christian, or did she also follow you?
This is an interesting bit of an interesting story. I don't know how like if I can go on another little bit of a.
You are welcome to take all the time you like.
Okay. So when I first started looking into all of this, I sat down with Amy. My wife's name's Amy, and I said, she's not interested. Like she doesn't really care. She was a committed believer and stuff, but she wasn't. It didn't really inform her day-to-day choices like as much. Like her lack of belief or belief. She kind of has this amazing ability not to care that much and just go, yeah, like, and I'm like, oh, like, which is crazy to me. Anyway, I sat down with her and I said, hey, I'd love to be able to share this journey with you, not away from faith, but this journey into, at the time, like this investigation into science and into like looking at our beliefs and stuff. And I said, I don't need you to do anything, but I just need you to be open when I'm telling you about something that I'm noticing. And she said, yeah, well, let's do it then. I'm totally happy to listen to what you've discovered and watch things or whatever and reason with you. And she got really good at she actually got really, really, really good at building like formal logic and arguments and stuff. And in arguments, she would correct me if I'm being too emotional. She'd be like, no, you're incorrect. This is why you're incorrect. And here's the premise, conclusion. You're wrong in this premise. And I'm like, all right, you've gone way over deep, and this is great. Oh. Like, so it sometimes resolves arguments a lot easier. But anyway, in that process, she decided to buy me tickets to, I think it was the 2016 Brisbane. Brisbane's a city now where I live. Faith and Science talk with at the Science Festival, at the World Science Festival. And we'd never been before, and she bought these tickets, and we decided to go down. And on stage it was a big talk, and on stage there was a Buddhist, a Muslim, some sort of an Orthodox Christian, a Catholic, and maybe a Hindu and an atheist. And they were all scientists or philosophers, and all of them. That
sounds like the beginning of an elaborate joke, doesn't it?
Yeah. And they were all saying that faith had no problem working with science. Had no issue in dealing with with science, and that they could still have their faith and practice their faith, even though they're all mutually exclusive faith, which was interesting. And I was sitting there watching it going, okay. And there's only one person who disagreed, and that was A.C. Grayling, who was there.
Really?
And and he said, wow. He goes, like he went through all the religious people, and he said, with this question, can faith and science mix? And he said something along the lines of, well, I know now that I was just brought here to disagree with everyone because I disagree. And everyone in the room laughed, and he said for him, faith is the antithesis to science. Like with faith, you start with a presupposition. With science, you've got to remove as much as you possibly can, or build on things that can be questioned. But anyway, so there was an interesting conversation. He's the only one I really agreed with, and that's the only part I really remember. But afterwards, he was the only one popular enough to have a book signing. And Amy went to the toilet, and I was looking at his books, and I saw one called The God Argument. And I went and picked it up. And I just saw the word God, and I was like, and it's a book on secular humanism. It had nothing to do with anything that I was thinking it was. And I decided to go get it signed. And it felt like some profound form of blasphemy to go get this atheist author to sign this book. Like, I didn't even listen to non-Christian music a lot of the time, only years prior. So I walk up to him and waited in line, and Amy came with me, and I said, hey, and I gave him the book, and I was nervous, and I was like kind of panicking a little bit, and I had a little bit of an anxiety disorder at the time. I still kind of do, but it was manifest a lot worse back then. And I said, just so you know, I was a Christian. I was actually in ministry. I was a youth pastor, and now I'm questioning my faith. So he stopped the signing straight away, and he looked up at me. And like, because it was just like, go, like with like signing or whatever. But with me, he stopped and he looked at me and he said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, well, it's it's really hard, and but I understand that and then he goes, "How are you going emotionally?" And I was like, "Oh, blah, blah, blah." And then he was like asking questions, and he goes, "I take my hat off to you. Not many people can do this, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is a good thing. And wherever you end up, I implore you for taking this journey." And then I said, "Oh, okay." And I was like taken aback, and I said, "Well, I'll read your book and I'll let you know what I think." And he goes, "Sure." And he opens the back and writes his personal email in it. It was like a .net or .yahoo or something. Like, it was old school email, so he's had it for a while. And I was like, "Whoa!" We got a photo with him, and as we walked back out of he looks like Doc Brown is crazy. He's got the white hair, and we're saying
he's a cool guy.
Yeah. And we're walking down the stairs, and Amy just said to me, she goes, I remember she said the words, "I think what you're doing is good." And I remember those words hit me like a ton of bricks. And she's like, I think it's important to investigate what we believe and why. And I think what you're doing is good. And then me and her sat there and spoke about beliefs for like really openly. Like for me, it felt like a moment where Amy kind of understood the gravity of the situation and understood that we were on the right side of, I guess, we're on the right side in that we're questioning what we believe. And since then, I don't know if Amy would call herself what Amy would call herself per se, but in general, I think she subscribes to many of the same beliefs. And we go back and forth on certain things, but she's definitely not a fundamentalist Christian anymore. But at the same time, there's a lot of people in our family that would be absolutely crushing for. So I don't publicly on my Facebook or anything post to my YouTube too publicly, just because it could really hurt their feelings or really make them upset. And some of our family, my family and Amy's family included, are extremely fundamentalist or not, and conspiratorial, like my father and a few other people. Like, just I won't go into specifics but a lot of them believe that the devil controls things and the earth may be flat and cancer is a fungus and chemotherapy kills people, and some really dangerous ideas in my opinion. And so we, in order to kind of keep those relationships going, we don't push too hard on those things. Yeah, with them. We don't even talk to them about them at all. We try and avoid those conversations as much as possible.
Yeah. There's an impulse in street epistemology somewhat to say, these are the people we could reach out to and use SE to challenge and talk. I don't think everybody's ready for that conversation, and not everybody's the best person to have it with them either. I think that is a fucking amazing story, by the
way. I used to really think, I used to say this to Amy, I was like, I feel like if I could just lock myself in a room with this person, whether it's someone in my family, their family, a friend of ours or something, Amy's family or a friend of ours, I was like, I could, there's no way out of these like logical problems, like whatever it is, like it could be anything, like 1 + 1 = 2, it doesn't matter, but there's no way out. It's like as soon as you define 1 and you define what 2 is and you define what addition is, there's no way out from saying 1 + 1 = 2. You can't do. And I now don't hold that perspective. I now believe that someone, people that we know, family, friends, will literally say 1 + 1 = 5, and you'll all agree on what 5 means, what 1 means, and it'll be that blatantly obvious, and you'd be like, and they will not accept it, and they get angry and fight you on it, and it's obviously, to me, they've got a deeper reason for their beliefs. It's not They don't reason themselves into their beliefs. They have these perspectives on life, and then that informs what they think they believe, if that makes sense, like what they say they believe. They've
woven it into their identity, and it's baked in there as an a priori truth, right? And
I don't know if a lot of them could actually deal with questioning, like they've held onto it for so long, that's got them through so many tough times. I don't know whether or not, I think it would be catastrophic for some of the people to, and these are older people, but it'd be catastrophic for them to, like, everything would fall apart. Like, I think they would possibly maybe be institutionalized. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's incredibly difficult to say. I just as I did and would again compliment you on your remarkable journey and genuinely reflect on whether or not I could do it. I mean, it's kind of easy for me all day to sit here and talk to people about various religious ideas and hopefully respectfully challenge them and sort of maybe ask them questions to help them reflect on things. But I've got no idea what it takes to let something like that go. I really don't. But I've heard stories now, many stories, I think, and I know it's incredibly difficult. And if I recognize that it can be so difficult and so painful, firstly, I'm empathetic for those people who have not managed to do that yet, wherever they may be on that journey. And secondly, then it would then lead me to have to conclude that for some people, it may just not be the right move for them. An elderly parent, for example, and would potentially be, it would be, I wouldn't know how to make that moral equation work out, like whether it would be the right thing to do in that case, And I don't know what that means. I share the reflection.
Yeah, it's like the old, it's like, oh, granddaddy's just a bit racist. It's fine. Like, he's not going to change. He's old. He's going to die in 10 years. Like, it's like that kind of thing, like it's, at what age do you just have to give up on old people and go, okay, like nothing's going to change. I mean, I guess you could still, you see, I should preface all of this by saying I would still engage in conversations with these people if it didn't get so nasty and emotional. Yeah. There are some people who I think I could never change their mind. However, I still engage in conversation with them because it's interesting and we can engage on this like one-on-one level. But there are just some friends and family that we have that, it's a one-way conversation. And it's not, yeah.
Yeah, SE has this term doxastic openness, which means like the kind of being mentally in a position where you are actually open to reflecting, not necessarily ready to change your mind, but just open enough to actually listen and not just respond to what you're hearing as if it were an attack that needed to be repelled without question. Like if you feel like somebody challenging your reasons for holding a faith position is just an attack, and narratives of the devil, for example, woven into that kind of thing, not quite frequently, but in any case, if you feel like it's an attack that instinctively needs to just be pushed away without thought, that you can dismiss that kind of thing immediately without having to think about it, there's nothing you can say in that moment to make this person actually stop and then take this information on board and actually think about it. And unless they're actually reflecting, unless you're actually getting them to do the work of thinking about why they believe what they believe, I think it's impossible. It just is impossible. And it's not just religious beliefs. I mean, there are lots of other beliefs in the world that have this nature of inducing people to just fail to want to engage intellectually with the issue and just respond emotively almost to the presence of contradictory information. So I think being aware of that is important.
Yeah, no, I think I would agree, and I think something that a lot of people don't understand is, or don't kind of realize is, this is a perspective I hold that maybe we could have a conversation about one time, because I'd be interested to hear your perspective as a lifelong atheist. But you hear a lot of people who are religious saying like atheists have faith and stuff like that, and I reject that kind of outright for the most part. But a lot of people I find that, especially people who really like love pop science and stuff, they believe they have some objective grasp on reality, where in a lot of ways that perspective is misguided and wrong. So in my opinion, so like I've got a family member who I respect dearly. He's got 3 science degrees, but he also is a non-dualist. Like he believes maybe I got that wrong, but he doesn't believe in the material world. So 3 science degrees, but he believes everything is consciousness first. Or I don't know if he'd ever bite the bullet and say that he asks what he believes, but every one of his talking points are done to something Hindu philosophy, which is essentially everything is consciousness. And he always he says that he spreads confusion like Jesus spreads love, right? So like he's really good at just like telling you why the holes in your theory. And one thing he pointed out was, the proper basic beliefs. I think, like I have to assume that I'm thinking that the universe exists and that we can make observations of this universe, that I'm real, at the universe is real. And he's like, they're completely unjustified. So he's like, it's and I'm like, yeah, they are unjustified, but we have to assume them to make observations of the universe or whatever. And that's fine. I'm totally cool with doing that. But a lot of people won't admit. A lot of people who are into the objective reality kind of perspective won't admit that they're starting from a unfalsifiable presupposition, and that unfortunately means that it's hard, because it's by no means the same as a faith belief, in regards to, like, because a faith belief is also assuming all those presuppositions, and then they've got objective reality, and then they're saying, and then they're adding faith on top of that. Right. So when I say objective reality, all I can do is point to, like, this is a table. This is, I'm touching things. I'm eating things. Right. Like, I'm doing things. I'm having conversation. And from the best of my perspective, this is what's happening. But I have no way to actually justify that. I have to just say these are the proper basic beliefs, and it's unjustified. And I'm okay with that. But a lot of people get this arrogance around laughing at religions, and saying, oh, they're unjustified, blah, 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 blah. But they don't. They can't accept the fact that their beliefs on a foundational level, it's BS all the way down. Like, it's bullshit all the way down. Like,
okay.
Eventually, you can make it. And this may be somewhere we disagree. And this is probably somewhere I would have disagreed with myself a few years ago. But my annoying uncle really challenged me on this. And then I started reading a lot into Hindu philosophy and stuff. And I was like, okay, this is interesting, and I had to bite the bullet and say for myself that, that it's unjustified.
Yeah, well, look, there is no epistemology without the foundational, what they refer to as properly basic beliefs. The idea of that this is just
that's what they call. Sorry.
Yeah, an a priori assumption that cannot be justified, because it's necessary for the epistemology, and you can't bootstrap the justification without the epistemology. So this is the nature of epistemology in general. It's the nature of all philosophical positions. I've never yet encountered anybody claiming that they can build an epistemological or philosophical framework without an a priori assumption. And so the interesting thing, though, so in some senses, right, I've heard this trap before. Aha, but you believe things without reason also, and therefore I'm entitled to believe what I believe without reason.
Yeah, I need to clarify. I don't subscribe to that. It's different.
I understand.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
I think it's completely different, and I know there's people in the comments who are going to say, "Oh, this guy's an idiot because it's not." No, just trust me. I've thought about this a lot, and I'm not an idiot. And I'm not taking that perspective. But yeah, I know what you mean.
I strongly advise you to disregard the voice of the chat in your head. It's never a good thing to think about. Well, look, so my rationalization here is it goes as follows. Firstly, I'm a philosophical skeptic, right? I cannot know for sure that anything is true or exists, right? I may know a true thing, but I can't know for certain that I do know it, right? Like, that's just how I think it is. I do not have direct access to external reality. All I have is sufficient confidences based on experiences and sensation that there is such a thing. Knowledge is not, truth is not available to me. Actual knowledge, as in knowing a true thing, is not available to me, right? So for me, the interesting thing is everybody from a philosophical perspective needs to dig down to try to find bedrock. And then they want to grow their epistemology from a sort of bottom-up sense and try to say, well, this is the foundation, and then from that we can then start to say we know things. This is Cartesian cogito ergo sum, right? I think therefore I am. That's the presupposition that there is a you at least, and then you can talk about the things that you experiences, such as there appears to be an external world, and there appears to be that world appears to follow some laws of consistency. There are some behaviors that I've observed, and therefore I can start to extrapolate a philosophy from there. But the reality is I don't think humans actually functionally work like this or need to work like this. And what I think humans mostly do is a middle out sort of philosophy, right? You don't start with certainty, but you've never had certainty in my view. And anybody that claims certainty is easily dismissed, I think. You just cannot be certain about things. So what you do is you say, like, I don't know anything, but I'm in the middle and I need to make a decision. So you work on sufficient confidences, right? I'm sufficiently confident that I'm in this conversation with you right now, and my computer's working right now, and that our internet connection's holding up to continue to talk to you, right? That may be wrong, right? In this moment, the internet connection might have blown out, and maybe my microphone stopped working, and in a fraction of a second, I'm going to find that out. But like, I'm sufficiently confident in this moment to justify my continued engagement in the conversation, right? I don't know truth, but I'm just motivated by what I think I'm seeing, and I'm responding to how I whether it's illusory or not, it doesn't matter. Even if I'm a brain in a vat or whatever
Exactly. It's like a pragmatic. Like
you have to act.
Like you can't, like, I guess it's like this is what I always say to my uncle too. Like it's you have the presupposition. Like I can't justify the presuppositions, but I know not to walk in front of a bus.
Right.
Because like and I always used to push him back on that and say, and not to walk in front of a bus. So you're accepting these presuppositions. And he says, no, I'm not. And I said, yes, you are. I said, by even replying to me, you're accepting that the universe exists. You're accepting that I exist, and you're accepting that. And he won't bite the bullet on that. And that's where we usually get into big arguments. But I believe people.
There's an important difference though between accepting something and as in acting on the assumption that it's true and claiming to know for sure that it's true, right? We don't need the certainty actually, because as I say, I don't think we've ever had it. We just need to be sufficiently confident to treat it as if it's true, right? And that's all we ever have.
It's like playing a video game, and as long as you know the rules of the video game, you can make you can do things inside the video game, and you can even bend the rules a little bit inside the video game if you know how to, like, I don't know, wall clip or something, or do something, so right. Yeah, similar. It's like you just got to know, even though the video game is not a real thing, like it's in some tangible way, it's still real in that you can make objective like conclusions, like I can do this in this video game or not do this,
Yeah, and like you think about children and how they operate, right? They don't have to have a sound epistemology in order to navigate the world and learn things and start to discover things, and like that's basically where we all are, right? Fundamentally. But as we get older, we like to pretend that we've grounded our belief systems in something more substantial than our own experience, right? We like to think that somehow we need to be more right than this, and that we need to be more confident in our position by attaching a label to it. Like, you can say, as some people I've heard say, I'm not an empiricist, right? But like, there are plenty of things that you're going to check every day before you commit to. Like, you're going to check that the oven's on before you put your food in there, right? You're going to look and you're going to see if it's and if you happen to open the door and it's of the oven and it's still cold, right? You're not going to assume, well, I've committed the prior conditions necessary, so it's going to be fine. No, you've now tested your assumption, and you will act on the evidence that you've discovered. We're all basically doing this same thing. And actually, I feel like one of the problems with this idea of trying to ground the way we operate as human beings in a more formal philosophical structure is that it inclines us to then make claims about the universe and the world that we don't need to make. So I'm having a conversation at the moment, which is really interesting. I think you might like with a Christian gentleman who's also, he's a very educated guy, very smart guy, very, very, very pragmatic and rational chap, right? Like it's been really interesting talking to him, and we seem to disagree mostly on the differences between how we assess the origin of the universe, right? And for him, it's a natural thing or it's an unnatural thing, right? It's either supernatural or natural. Like however the weighting of those things is, like they're both potentially answers in play for him. And my frustration with this is the fact that I don't need to answer this question, right? It seems like almost a cop-out, but fundamentally, there's a box, and we don't know what's inside the box, right? And so the question of what's inside the box, we could speculate, and we could start to relatively assess the possibilities of the speculation, right? But honestly, if we don't know what's inside the box, the true answer to what do we know about what's inside the box is I don't know. That is currently the acceptable answer for how did the universe begin? Like what created everything, right? I don't know is as far as I can tell, the best answer.
It's the only answer that's actually intellectually honest.
Perfectly valid answer, right? And the problem is that, you know, that people don't like this. People don't like it because they feel it's either evasive or, you know, you're being non-committal, you're just denying the existence of God, and you say you don't know, but there's, you know, but no, you've just assumed there is a God, and now you're shoehorning him into this gap, right? And
an analogy that I always go back to when talking to people about things like this is, how do you, like, if we were two Greeks sitting down, you know, enjoying a lunch or something, you know, 2,000 years ago, and we heard thunder on the mountains, one of them would say, hey, that's Zeus. That's obviously Zeus doing his thing, or I don't know, one of the Greek gods. I'm not really good at Greek mythology. Yeah. And I would say, well, we don't know that. And he goes, well, what else would it be? Like, it's obviously, like, you don't have an explanation. You're saying you don't know what this noise is. I'm saying it's Zeus. That makes more sense.
And now you're denying my what evidence do you have to prove to me that it wasn't Zeus? You know, I've got my hypothesis. Where's yours? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, and so, like, I feel like a lot of these questions that we have about, you know, how did the universe truly begin? How did life truly begin? Like, all these kind of things, we don't know. We have a couple of, like, hypotheses and stuff. Yeah. And we know things like the Big Bang Theory, which talks about the inflation, but we don't know, like, exactly. We have some hypothesis on, like, how the Big Bang started, but we don't really know. And we don't, you know, there's a lot of, like, unsolved mysteries in the universe, but that's exciting. And we shouldn't then assume, we shouldn't just go, and therefore God. This is the God of the gaps, and it's
exactly the God of the gaps.
And you just need to, like, another thing I always ask is, like, how did you assume gods and not alien lizard overlords? Like, why did you? And I mean, a lot of the time, those kind of conversations aren't the best for straight epistemology if you start saying alien lizard overlords and stuff, but because I tend to find that you want to be as, like, polite as possible, but I think that having a conversation with, like, a friend over some beers or something, it's you know, you can get a bit more rowdy and you can ask questions like that.
Yeah, engaging in a conversation, in a discussion. So I use the expression stepping into the conversation, right? As a street epistemologist, if I'm having an SE interview, I try super hard not to step into the conversation, right? My opinion should not be relevant to an SE interview, right? The purpose of that is to encourage somebody else to reflect on their reasons why they believe what they believe, and that has got nothing to do with what you happen to believe, right? Like, whether I agree with you or disagree with you, or I've never heard of that thing that you're exploring before, it should kind of be irrelevant, right? The process should be the same. And to me, that's one of the things that I think is both unique and special about SE, right? It as much as possible. Now, you know, that opens itself up to this accusation of being sort of stealth atheism or something like that. You know, the SE's agenda, and I can't certainly deny that some people within the community certainly do have agendas for what they're using SE to achieve, right? But for me, I strongly stick to this idea that it's like, my views should not matter. And the moment I feel myself stepping into the conversation, I know I'm making a mistake from an SE perspective, right? And because the moment you do that, you're in a debate, you're in an argument. You're no longer trying to get them to notice something. You're trying to tell them something about the world, and that's not as effective.
That's a good way to think about that. Can I ask you why you do straight epistemology?
Sure. Yeah, I think. Well, I think I was doing SE before. I guess my origin story would be something like, atheist my whole life, read The God Delusion, sort of semi-ironically. I was kind of intrigued with it because The God Delusion was seen as a sort of vaguely heretical book. People were getting really concerned about it. There were people discussing it on TV very stoically, and I wanted to see, like, you know, I wasn't really a big reader at that point, but I thought, you know, well, I want to see what this sort of dangerous book was. And firstly, I read it, and Dawkins, for all his faults, is a charming as hell writer. Like, he writes beautifully about things. So that struck me. And the second thing that struck me, because I thought, well, you know, I've got nothing to fear from this scary supposedly book because it's supposedly converting me to what I already am, so that's fine. What it did do, I think, was make me suddenly realize that religion, whether I believed it or not, still had a massive influence on society. And where I grew up, I kind of grew up in, my school was like Church of England, technically, as all schools were at that point. So we had prayers and things and what have you, but it was all very weak source stuff. It was very passive, sort of lightly held. And there was a sort of sense as I was growing up that religion was something that, a bit like Santa, that people were growing out of, and it was sort of a bit of, doomed to the past somewhat. And there was a really strong sense that just over enough time that we would just be letting this go, and eventually everybody wouldn't take it seriously. And there were just a few people that we were all a bit embarrassed about, but they sort of still believed it. So you can't really be too mean to them. But ultimately, that's kind of how I felt. And then I read The God Delusion, and frankly, the thing that really struck me was just actually how much it made me realize that actually, religion is still having not just a big say in the world, but actually has a meaningful say in my life. And is having, there was an arresting moment where it talked about the idea that whenever there was some moral issue that needed to be discussed on television, they would always call a bishop and a priest and maybe a local, an imam or anybody. So they would fill the stage with these religious people, and then there would be one medical professional there or something with a relevant field of study. I'm like, I've seen that he's dead right. That's ridiculous. Why is this? So I kind of read that and was really startled, I think, by that. And then later I discovered Hitchens, as many people did, and I think Christopher Hitchens is a remarkably charismatic orator, and it was just interesting all day watching him just beat up.
I actually got a first edition hardback of God Is Not Great.
Nice.
I picked it up secondhand, and I got a portrait of him on my wall. So yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. Big Hitch love. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Hitch, but there's a great portrait. I'm into photography, and he got me into Johnny Walker Black. So whenever I have a bit of Johnny Walker, I always like to pick up
pull one out from the Hitch.
Yeah. But also at the same time, I love his charisma and stuff. But I also don't agree with him with a lot of things. So not a lot, but some, like his take on women and his take on and stuff like that. Like, I'm like, oh, this is very cringe. Like, this is so old school. But at the same time, I do respect his charisma and stuff. But sorry, I interrupted.
No, not at all. Please do. So most people, you'll learn to have to. You have to, essentially. I will just keep talking. It was amazing because I think it was just fascinating. One of the things that is quite, I think, fair for a lot of atheists is not really giving time to listen to the arguments on the other side. And so one of the things that I thought was at least intellectually honest was to hear what modern Christian apologetics sounded like. And listening to the debates with Hitchens was kind of my way of exposing myself to that. And of course, that you could now say in retrospect that wasn't an ideal sample, right? But these are some of them. You had William Lane Craig, for example, and Dinesh D'Souza, right? And these are fairly well-known names in this Christian apologetic space, right? William Lane Craig is championed all day as the hero of the Christian apologetic scene, for reasons beyond me. But watching Hitchens, like, he wasn't a philosopher. That's the first thing. He wasn't a scientist. That's the other thing. He was an author. He was a writer. And he addressed their demands for respect with indignancy. And that was kind of refreshing and slightly alarming to me, which is like, you can be polite but not have to respect this stuff. And you can be civil and you can be respectful, but you don't have to be respectful to the extent that you compromise your intellectual integrity. And I thought that was remarkable from him. And so, over a period of time, I kind of, after watching Hitchens and also reading more broadly about philosophy and getting really angry that I wasn't taught more philosophy at school, because this was not anything near my education. I left school at 16 and basically, never really did anything academic after that. I'd sort of become rather despondent with education. But then after school and reading more broadly and slightly inspired by Hitchens and Dawkins and the rest of them, but I started reading more broadly and became an autodidact, somebody who just learns this stuff on their own, essentially. And this was something that I discovered I had a great joy for and a pleasure for. And then I ended up just getting into conversations with anybody that would want to talk about these things with me. And I realized if you embrace a little bit of Hitchens's charm and charisma and friendliness and openness and just general bounty, and you you genuinely want to have a conversation and not just inject messages and truths. You can have amazing conversations with people, especially with strangers. Anthony Magnabosco said once in a video, and it made me laugh, that he was talking about before he started really doing street epistemology, he would have really long, deep conversations with taxi drivers about things. And it made me laugh because I would do that exact same thing, because there's something really strange about like a taxi relationship, right? Which is that if you're in a cab and you know you're going to be in the cab for like 30 minutes or something with a complete stranger, you don't know this person. You don't know anything about their history. You haven't chosen them specifically, right? You just happen to be sat in a cab together for 30 minutes, right? So there you are, two human beings in a box for 30 minutes. And at the end of that, you're going to get out, you're going to pay them, they're going to go, and you're never going to see them again, right? That's a wonderful opportunity to have a genuine, real, and frank conversation with just another human being with no need to hide anything.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I found that I would have these conversations with largely Muslims, it seemed, but not always, but people from like every walk of life. I spoke to people from Iran and Iraq that had come to the UK. I would talk to people that had been, devoutly religious. That I spoke to many people, Muslims that were no longer sure how much they believed it, but felt they honestly had to teach it to their children strictly and firmly. But even though they didn't really believe it, and they were questioning that. I talked to people that had very strange views of atheists, and you'd hear the old talking points come out time and time again, the old sort of classic, without God, I couldn't have morality and things. And we would just chat about them. And it was just honestly some of the most fun conversations you can have with another human being when you start to do this. So when I came across Anthony's videos and I came across the street epistemology community, I was like, there's like a whole group of people doing this. This is fun. I like this. And it's been charming ever since. Have you read A Manual for Creating Atheists?
No.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It turned out I had read that book sometime before I got into the community, and actually dismissed it almost immediately. The first few chapters talk about Hitchens and Dawkins and with great reverence, and talks about, the idea is that there was, in fact, he even says, I think in the beginning of the book, that there isn't going to be another Christopher Hitchens, right? Everybody's looking for the next Christopher Hitchens. And the truth is that there isn't going to be another one. And that what Peter Boghossian is suggesting is that we should all become these sort of army of Hitchenses. And he called that army of Hitchenses the street epistemologists, right? And so this is the book that gave birth to the term street epistemology, because the first chapter is called Street Epistemology, and he talks about the idea that you're going out and engaging people with religious beliefs. The problem with this book, and the reason I would not recommend it, and the reason I put it down after only a few chapters, because it made me annoyed, was because it takes such an unfortunate tone. Like, it's a really, really unfortunate tone. And if this was a manual truly for creating atheists, it's a manual for creating exactly the same arrogant, shit-eating, really aggravating, smug atheists that we just don't need. We've got too many of, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I read it, I put it down, was like, no. And then later, after discovering street epistemology through Anthony's videos and seeing what Reed was doing, and then joining the Discord server, somebody mentioned A Manual for Creating Atheists, and I was like, I think I've read that, or I've picked it up, and that's when I reckoned I didn't even make the connection. I didn't even make the connection to the book until after I joined the community and was sort of hanging around and a bit later. So it was kind of weird to me that I've then subsequently gone back and reread it, or at least read it in its entirety. And everything I didn't like about it, I still really don't like about it. Like, I wasn't wrong. It is in there that it's very unfortunately worded all across the board. Like, for example, the very first paragraph, which I quote quite a lot, says something like, street epistemologists need to help the faithful value reason. And I'm like, fuck, man, if you're starting from the a priori assumption that the only reason they hold their faith position is that they have no value for reason.
Yeah.
And also, how would you hope to reason them into valuing reason, by the way? Like, what is your strategy there? Like,
this is a big problem. Like I'm on the same boat as you in regards to I I love Dawkins for who he is and, you know, parts of him, but it's a critique I've heard of him a lot, which is he doesn't understand the very things, he doesn't have any respect for or understand the very things he tries to critique, which is religion a lot of the time. And I saw Cosmic Skeptic challenge him on that in the interview. And I think he respected being challenged, which was cool. That's one of the things I like about Dawkins, is he respected the way that Alex challenged him, and he even tweeted about it and said a surprisingly challenging interview when he put it out. But yeah, I think he's and I can understand where he's coming from. It's he's very bothered by religion and things like that, and how it's crept into everything, and how it's kind of ruining his favorite thing, which is evolution and biology and stuff. It's kind of putting a damper on all of that. So he's bothered by it, but I think he's let himself get so bothered that that people can then make like that. He doesn't examine the religions with any type of I don't know what word I would use, but he doesn't approach them with any type of weight. Like he doesn't look at them with like, this is an important thing to people, there could be some truth in this, you know, etc. He just views them as like idiots in a lot of the way. Like it comes across as like these people are idiots.
Yeah, there's a lack of empathy maybe, but I think I've thought about this a bit, and I don't know Richard Dawkins, so this is pure speculation on my part. But for the longest time, I think nobody was speaking out against religion, and even in our modern age, it became still a social taboo not to speak out against religion. And I think that Richard Dawkins has definitely come from a generation of people who did not deal with real-time communication. Like that was not the space that they were dealing with. If they had a view that they were getting out there into the world, to a certain extent, they were writing a book and addressing it, as writing it as favorably as they could, and explaining as clearly as they could their position and hoping it reached the right people. This requires a certain type of tone of rhetoric. If you're feeling like you're addressing a group of people that have had it their way all day, every day, right, and you're actually going to step out and say, "Up with this, we will no longer put," right? Like you have to say things a certain way. You have to present your arguments a certain way because you're addressing all of religion, right? You're not addressing just one particular person or one particular religious group, right? The problem, of course, comes when he's not operating in that media space. Like he's now operating in a space where his comments are tweeted out and they're just addressed to the world at large, and they're not really always contextualized. And
I don't necessarily have an issue with like a lot of what he says. Like I think what he says is generally pretty on point. I think it's more he sometimes critiques it without having a full understanding of it, and he doesn't have a full understanding of it because he doesn't think it's of any value to have a good understanding of it. And just to clarify as well, I'm only critiquing him because he is a giant. Like if this was the average person down the street, I wouldn't be saying like, oh, like he is an absolutely amazing for what he's done, and I respect him dearly a lot. In the same way I would critique Hitchens on his take on women and stuff and humor, is the same way it's because I have respect for him that I'm saying he could do better in this area. Yeah.
Well, but there's a marked difference here, I think. And again, I know I'm challenging your criticism, but that's not to say that I don't agree with much of what you're saying. I think, but I think it's worth thinking about this. That the lens of this is that Dawkins is a evolutionary biologist, right? He's spent his time in science, writing about science, communicating as a science communicator. That's what he does. That's who he is as a person. It's a side project for him that he's one of the world's most famous atheists, right? It's something he's done on top of his career. Hitchens was an author, right? Hitchens all day, like you can watch some of his debates, and now I'll sort of cringe a bit and flinch when he gets something wrong or makes a cheap point badly, and he's not beyond it, right? He's not beyond a very cheap point in any case, and likes with Hitchens, you get the sense, especially that he just wished he had a better person to argue with rather than he likes it when there's blood in the water, and there just too often wasn't really. But in any case, like people can criticize Hitchens all day on the way he handled some of his debates, but the reality is he's not a philosopher. He's not a scientist. He never claimed to be. He was an author writing a book about his views on religion and explained why he felt the way he felt on it. And then he went and did a book tour and argued with anybody that would let him argue with him. And all power to him. But again, this is night and day difference from someone like a Christian apologist, like whose academic career and job is to swim in the waters of religion and to argue for it. Like this is William Lane Craig, for example, has only ever been a Christian apologist, right? Like that's his whole life has been based on theology and religion and studying religion, and then engaging in Christian apologetics, right? That's his job, and so whilst it's not unfair to hope that somebody in a position like Dawkins is in would know better about a lot of the religions he's critiquing, it's simply just not sufficiently interesting to him. Like, it's almost like, and I'm sure Dawkins would hear it like this, in order for you to disagree that the Quran was the true word of God, right? Would you have had to have read the Quran, the Hadith, and studied Islamic scholarship on the topic for some period of time before you could say that you wanted to at least ask questions and challenge the authority of something claiming that the Quran? Like, I think we would feel that we could still say things about it without having done all of that. And same thing for the Torah or the Bhagavad Gita or the whatever, name your religious text, like the Book of Mormon, fucking Dianetics, whatever, like whatever it is. So you could is it if it's necessary that we read all of these things and have a studied history of them in order to say, I'm not sure
I guess, like, if he was just the average Joe, like it wouldn't matter. But because he's got he's so well respected. It's like when someone says, it's not like it's like if someone said, I reject all the millions of Hindu gods, and it's like there are millions. That's such a grade 2 understanding of Hinduism. Like, Hinduism is not millions of gods. Like, Hinduism is like, there are deities that represent parts of like the god, like depending on what Hinduism you have, or it's like
there you go. Yeah.
It's like or it's like saying it's like saying, like, it's just taking like a very, very, like, so blatantly like basic understanding of something that even just a 5-minute Google search would have resolved, on like reading the Wikipedia page. That makes me think, okay, he's critiquing these things at a level, he's respected at a level that's so high up, and his criticisms are valid. But for the religious person, they go, that's not what I believe. I don't believe what? I don't believe. Like, most Christians are not creationists or young earth creationists. They believe in evolution. And yet he comes across sometimes like he's
straw manning them.
Yeah, essentially. And I think that's where it comes. If you start the conversation saying most Christians believe in evolution, blah blah blah, but for some people who don't, and this is the problems I have with it, that would be a better framing, I think. But he comes across very much like, and I guess this is the fault of not him, it's more the fault of his popularity. It's like he's gotten so popular. Yeah. So yeah.
That's an interesting reflection. Look, I mean, one of the things that Hitchens said was that because he would almost always get the criticism that the things you said that doesn't apply to me. I don't think this, sort of thing. And I think it was Hitchens that was saying, like, look, in order for me to do this properly, I think it might have even been Dawkins actually. I think he said, in order for me to do this properly, I'd have to write a book for everybody's personal belief of God, right? Because
that sounds like Dawkins.
The problem really is like that. If you tell me you're a Christian, like, I used to think I would know what you meant by that, but now I know more about Christianity than I ever did. Now I know I don't know what you mean by that, and I would have to. There are Christians that do not believe in the divinity of Christ, right? That there are people that would call themselves Christians that do not believe that Jesus Christ was resurrected or was divine. Now, I don't know what Christianity means if it doesn't mean that you believe that that's true, but there are some people out there that would claim this.
Yeah.
Now, like, and you know, you may say that's a small group of people, and I would say you're probably right about that. But Christianity, there's an illusion of homogeneity, I think, in these religious ideas, and it's useful.
It's never, as the way Bart Ehrman says, it's never been a monolith, or I think monolith is. Yeah, it's never been one thing.
Yeah. Ever. Yeah, and like every religion is like this. Like, you know, there is just the homogeneity is just not there, right? So you just have to find out what people specifically believe. So of course, if you write a book and say God, you know, God is a delusion, and these are all my anti-apologetics. You know, Dawkins even says that, you know, the God that he doesn't believe in is probably more of a Roman Catholic sort of God. You know, it's a Christian God. You know, But that's because that's his experience and his framing, right? But fundamentally, the arguments apply to all gods, but that they were specifically perhaps addressed to a narrow view of religion that he was familiar with. And as a result, there are going to be lots of people that say, well, I don't believe that. You know, I don't believe in a young earth, right? Well, fine, great, good for you. Progress of a kind, as Hitchens would say. But like, honestly, there's going to be plenty in here that's going to still be probably speaking to you. And if there isn't, there probably are still very good rebuttals to you. But we can't write a book for everybody, right? A book is a broad medium. So yeah, I don't know if that's I don't wish to deny your criticism of Dawkins. I think it's certainly a fair observation. And it would be nice if we had professional atheist apologists, you know, maybe. I don't know if that would be a good thing or not. I don't know how much work they would get. Certainly their funding would be harder to come by than the Catholic
They kind
Church.
of, a lot of the time too, they're like the atheists, like the anti of things in regard. Like I consider myself an agnostic atheist, but like you know, science is the fun side of things. Like it's like, oh, what's space like, exoplanets and stuff, where atheism is just saying, no, you're wrong, like that's not right. Like, so I don't know if there would be much work in that, because you have to, like, the exciting parts of I guess atheism for me has always been like, you know, viewing science with unbiased eyes, being free of religious dogma, but it's always like a taking, you know, I don't know. I'm rambling a little bit now.
No, ramble away. I will happily ramble too, but we should probably call it to an end just for the sake of our listeners.
Yeah.
But honestly, our half an hour conversation has ballooned into an hour and 20 minutes of genuinely brilliant, and I really enjoyed it. And so all power to it. Let's make this the first of many, because like I've really enjoyed chatting to you, David. It's been absolutely phenomenal, and I genuinely do want to hear more about your game making and endeavors in that space, because it's a space that I've dabbled myself in, and I love video games. So yeah, we should talk about that. But David, thank you. So, is there anything? What's the name of your channel, by the way? Do you want to do the like and subscribe bit?
Yeah. So, if someone goes to davidmcdonald.xyz, it'll take them straight there, because it's such a common name that you can't find me if you search Dave McDonald. But davidmcdonald.xyz or youtube.com/davidmcdonaldyt, I think will bring you there. But yeah, I make videos on religion, philosophy, science, from an ex-youth pastor, and yeah, I'm trying to do some street epistemology on there as well, and yeah.
Awesome. There will be links in the description, and you'll be on my list of people that I think there's like a recommended channels section in the bottom of my YouTube channel, so you'll be on there as well. But yeah, absolutely, do check it out. Thank you so much for your time, Dave. We will be speaking again. I am very high confidence, I would say, in that claim.
Definitely. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, mate. Bye.